Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Ghost Stories of Devon and Cornwall. I'm joined by best-selling author Amanda Lees, writer of thrilling World War II novels, The Paris Spy's Girl and If I Can Save One Child Amongst Them. Check out her website, you'll find links in the comments below. Reviews of her books are great, by the way. Now, whilst Amanda's known for her fictional tales, her own life story is just as fascinating. How could it not be when her father was a spy and her mother ran a field hospital in the jungles of Borneo? Or of greatest interest to Ghost Stories of Devon and Cornwall, she attended a haunted boarding school run by nuns right here in the English Riviera. Amanda, this is going to be great, I'm sure. What could be more exciting than hearing about a haunted convent and boarding school, ghostly nuns, strange goings on, creepy old dorms after lights out? Absolutely brilliant stuff. But please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers.
Hello, I'm Amanda Lees and I'm an author, and I went to school in Torbay, to a convent school which isn't there anymore, and it was called Stoodley Knowle Convent for Young Ladies because that's what it said on the sign outside, and that's what I'm sticking with. And my family have links to Devon. My father and my grandmother are both buried in Seaton, and my aunt used to live in Beer, which is East Devon. And all of that means, I like to come back, have a visit, say hello to them, say hello to friends who stayed down in Devon, and basically I feel that my heart sort of belongs in the county.
Understandably so, Amanda, given your family connections and schooling here. But before we touch upon those days, where are you based now?
I'm in London. At the moment, I'm in the north where my daughter is at university, to be close to her, just not because I'm a hover mum. She kind of needs mum close by. But I tend to travel quite a lot because I write spy fiction. I write World War II thrillers, and I'm about to start a book which is set in Cairo and has a dual timeline. So it's present day and the past. So obviously I have to research Cairo. And incidentally, the aunt who lived in Beer, they spent many years in Egypt, which is what gave me the idea. So I'll be popping off there to have a little bit of research. My other books are set in France. I've written 5 books now set during World War II involving SOE, the resistance, strong women, amazing people, because I based it all on the real life characters. And the one that just came out is called If I Can Save One Child, and it's about the people who got downed airmen, civilians, whoever, over the Pyrenees to safety. And in this book, there's one little boy, the only remaining child from an orphanage that was decimated by the Nazis. And they have to find him to get him out because he was Jewish and take him over the Pyrenees to freedom. And the woman who does so in the book also manages to save the bloke and another child as well, because she's pretty fab. And they are all genuinely based on real life incidents.
Your books sound amazing, and I know from checking out your website, amandalees.com, and from Goodreads and Amazon, the reviews for your novels are very, very good. Strong women feature prominently in these Second World War thrillers. But look, your own background and parents' life stories are just as fascinating, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, my parents met in the jungle in Borneo, where my mum, who was a nurse, was busy. She was running field hospitals, but she was also helping the district governor. So they would have to go into the longhouses, which were occupied by the local tribes, and count the heads, which were on a little high shelf, I believe, set around the longhouse because the tribes were headhunters, and mum had to make sure there wasn't an extra one added because they weren't supposed to do it anymore. And she met my dad, who was being a spy. Dad went to Oxford. He spoke many modern languages, and I now have his old passports. You should see the stamps in them. But his cover was import, export. They went back to Hong Kong because my mum had already been there. They got married there, and then sadly, he died when I was 3. So everything I know about him, my mum told me. She also told me how he knew Burgess, he knew Maclean. It was, the stuff that would come out after 3 sherries was really interesting. And she loved him till the end of her life. So, Yeah, they were an amazing couple, and she was a tiny little sort of feisty Glaswegian who became a matron in the end. I grew up in a hospital. She ran the hospital in Hong Kong I grew up in on the Peak. And my father was very tall, very urbane. I think, and they just look so sweet together in the photos.
So you're born in colonial Hong Kong, but sent to Devon to Torquay for schooling. Tell us about Stoodley Knowle. What was your boarding school like?
It was a boarding school and it was a convent because my mother was Catholic and she, bless her, she thought it would be warmer in the southwest for us, which actually it didn't seem that warm because they never turned the heating on. And so I remember, because I was 10 when I came to boarding school, and because mum had a very responsible job, she was a widow, there were three of us. She really needed to make sure that we were safe and that someone was looking after us, so she got on with work and earning the money to keep us. And I remember landing at Heathrow and looking out because we got the train down to Torbay and thinking, God, it's really grey. And then we arrived at school and I guess it was a bit like your first day at prison because, I kind of walked in there and then we all had to stand behind our chairs at the dining table. And we were all told to sit and we basically had to pray before and after every meal. And frankly, we just prayed all day, before and after every lesson. We woke up in the morning, fell on our knees and had to pray. And it was a complete culture shock. And there were these nuns who we don't tell them, but we called them the penguins. And we used to entertain the locals because every Sunday they would take us on a walk down to the beach, which meant that all the local lads could line up and shout stuff at us while we were in our hats, blazers, gloves. It was just mortifying, In fact, I met a guy who said, yeah, I remember you. And I was like, he used to stand there with his mates yelling at us because we were allowed out just, I think, in the 5th year to the local shops. We were locked up in there.
And one night you had a run-in with Hell's Angels, Amanda.
I was in a dormitory called Holy Angels, which was really spooky. And we heard this roaring because we overlooked, you look out the window, there was a tennis court below, and then over that wall was the swimming pool. And we looked out the wall and looked out the window, and there's all these motorbikes roaring up. We're like, oh, yeah. And then these guys literally were stripping off, diving in the pool. And all you could see were two nuns flapping like, giant bats. Oh, get out of our pool! Out of our pool! And they were roaring with laughter, swimming up and down. And for us, it was just like, this was heaven. We were looking at these guys, because, we had one altar boy to torture. And we just looked at these guys going, this is great. Loved it.
It sounds very different to the rather bland modern Catholic comp I went to in the Wirral. It's almost like one of those old St. Trinian's films, in fact.
This was, we did our best to rebel because if you're going to lock a bunch of young women up or young kids up together, you're going to rebel. We had so much to rebel against. I nicked all the altar wine one night. I'm consecrated. I want you to know this, but it was stashed beneath the altar. And it's not very nice, actually. It tastes like sweet grape juice. So, no, I had a racket running on the train down. I used to get squaddies to get us vodka miniatures, and we stashed those in the radiators. It was pretty, because the Limpston Commando is on the way. So I just sashay up to them and go, listen, can you go and get us some miniatures from the bar?
I have to say, Amanda, forget your novels, great as they are, for a minute. Your memoirs will make a great read. Anyway, on to the reason why we're talking tonight. And this boarding school you were sent to as a girl, this convent run by nuns in Torquay, it was haunted. Tell me about Stoodley Knowle's ghost.
We had several ghosts, and the one that terrified me the most was, if you can imagine this, the convent was quite an old building, and we had very long corridors. They seemed to go on forever. I've never seen such long corridors, and coming off them would be the dormitories and such. Now, during the day, we were not supposed to go back upstairs. We had to stay in our classrooms or dining room, but I'd forgotten something. So I scurried upstairs, and it was beside Holy Angels, the dormitory I was just mentioning, and I hear footsteps behind me. And I thought, that's it. I'm caught. It's a nun. I'm simply going to have to make excuses, right? So I turn round, fully expecting to see some nun glaring at me, and there is nothing there. And I'd heard those footsteps as clear as anything. And I thought, right. And I'm pretty skeptical. So I thought, okay, maybe this is my imagination, which I have a pretty vivid one, obviously being a writer. So I turned back round and took a few more steps. And whatever it was behind me also took a few more steps. And it was at that point I was like, and I just ran for it completely. I just ran downstairs, told everyone what had happened, and they totally believed me because it was not the first time things had happened there.
Wow, so the nuns knew the old Georgian corridors were haunted by phantom footsteps. Very creepy. What else did you experience there?
Okay, so now we also, if you want to picture this, we had a chapel which was attached by what we call glass corridor. It was actually a sort of glass walkway and a chapel. And beyond the chapel, excuse me, was a graveyard for the nuns who had died, part of the order, which would freak us out completely. Now, we often had to be in chapel to carry out perhaps a vigil. We were often there on our knees for a very long time, but late into the night. And so you imagine, and the lights were not on. There were just the candles burning on the altar. And we were there conducting a vigil, but actually we were sort of, I don't know, daydreaming, flicking through them, passing each other notes, whatever it was. But it was within this chapel that we would see flickers of movement. From in a chapel, you had the nuns on one side, you had us sort of in the main part, if you like, but the nuns had their separate section. But always the flickers of movement were from where the nuns would sit. And we would always see something moving across. And to us, it was always one of the old nuns who'd gone off to, sleep forever in the graveyard. But again, we all saw them at one time or another. And it wasn't because we were knackered and trying to keep our eyes open. There were definite figures moving across behind the altar, doing things as if they were still there. Actually, it's giving me shivers now because I'm seeing it again. It's just that thing of, whoa,
Oh, I do. And it's giving me shivers too, just thinking about it. I've always thought old hospitals, old schools, they have, I don't know, a forbidding atmosphere about them. But what about your dorm, Holy Angels? You mentioned earlier that was a spooky place. Tell us why.
Several of us were woken up by someone touching our face at night. So I woke up one night to see one of my closest friends sitting up trying to box someone away. And when I asked her what had happened, she was like, there was someone there. I was trying to get rid of them. But I was woken up several times by, if you feel someone just brushing your face and you kind of wake up and think, was that a spider? But then no, it felt exactly like fingers brushing your face. And again, Holy Angels was considered the most haunted dormitory. But we all, having Sue sitting up in bed and boxing something away really blew my mind.
Well, God, yeah, be enough to have me sit up in bed and get the old rosary beads out, I reckon. Amanda, these are great ghost stories, and I'm really grateful to you for sharing them. I wonder, it's often said that poltergeist activity correlates with the presence of adolescent girls. That was certainly the case with both the Enfield and Battersea poltergeists. What do you think, Amanda? Could it have been the presence of so many repressed teenage girls in a confined area that, I don't know, somehow manifested these supernatural happenings?
Possibly, because, I've thought of that. I've seen many poltergeists, except it certainly wasn't poltergeist. There were no, things didn't sort of fly across the room or anything. It was definite interaction with us. And I genuinely think it was the nuns who'd passed on or whatever. Someone, but, the stroking of the face wasn't horrible, but it was scary. The footsteps terrified me. And that felt kind of malevolent. It felt as if there was a bad presence behind me. but yeah, it's possible. But poltergeists and ghosts are quite different things.
Hmm.
And Stoodley is definitely haunted. Definitely.
Which perhaps the new residents will find out the hard way, the old school and convent having been closed and an estate of houses built on the grounds. So will the old ghosts, the dead nuns, linger and haunt these new dwellings? Well, something similar happened at Stowford Grange near Lifton, a ghost story we'll hear about in a future episode of Ghost Stories of Devon and Cornwall. In the meantime, many thanks. Thanks a million, in fact, for coming on tonight and sharing your stories, Amanda. If people like our content, please hit like and subscribe. I hope to raise some much needed cash for food banks in Devon and Cornwall. And the way YouTube works, we need subscribers to make that happen. Best wishes, everyone. Don't have nightmares. Good night. God bless.